2001, Norihiro Yagi released the first chapter of his third manga, which would eventually become his magnum dong. But despite its many accomplishments, Claymore always has to play second fiddle to that other long-running dark fantasy manga. Everyone always wants to talk about Berserk, but what about its little sister? Is there no more love for Emoto's and Biden's America? Well, now that Patriots are in control, Kino will be discussed. There's an anime and a manga. We'll tackle them in that order so you can see more of the anime, and because that way I don't have to edit as much. Production stuff, plot summary, spoilers, and a review. That is what you've signed up for. Alright, let's do it. Intro over. In 2007, Madhouse, hot off the heels of Death Note, Black Lagoon, and a shoujo I'm not watching anytime soon because if this hits 30%, my friends aren't going to talk to me anymore, adapted the still ongoing Claymore manga into a 26-episode anime series. I'll go ahead and spoil the surprise and tell you this does have an anime-only ending, but it's one that had the seal of approval from Norihiro Yagi, the manga author. Madhouse made sure to involve him in the anime's development to make sure the show felt like the manga, but Yagi was surprisingly open-minded about change. Since he hadn't finished of the manga yet, he told them they could end it however they wished. Even though Madhouse got the green light, the ending to the Claymore anime, while original, still ended in a way that allowed them to keep going in the future and be pretty faithful to the source material. I mean, they'd need a handful of anime-only episodes to connect certain things, and they'd either have to forget certain other developments or try to reincorporate them in the future, but a continuation could happen any day now. On an island continent divided into 47 districts, terrifying demons infiltrate towns and cities to feast on human guts. These creatures are called Yoma, and they have enormous strength and can even shapeshift into everyday people. When they devour their first victim, they not only take their appearance, but also their memories. This makes it almost impossible to identify who's a Yoma and who's not. That's why each district has a silver-eyed witch who can easily detect Yoki, the demonic energy which flows through the Yoma. These mysterious all-female warriors belong to an even more mysterious male-run organization. Internally, these ladies are labeled with numbers, but the common folk call them all by the name of the imposing weapon they wield, Claymore. Besides the silver eyes, Claymores also have blonde hair and wear all white. But like with all seemingly pure girls, what's underneath might disturb you. We'll save that for later. Claire is one of these 47 Claymores on a mission to deal with demons in her district. She meets a little hag-pilled rascal named Rocky in a village where a Yoma has been killing someone every few days. Most of the people in the village, like most of my core audience, are totally scared of these ladies, but Rocky finds her intriguing and shows her around town despite her unpleasant demeanor. After a hard day on the love quest, he heads back home and finds out the Yoma Claire's looking for is actually his brother, who just ate his uncle and is about to eat him as well. But right before he gets eaten, Claire bursts through the ceiling and saves him, and then leaves just as quickly as she came. Rocky tags along since there's nothing left for him in the village. Also, they kicked him out because if his brother was a Yoma, then, he could be too. He's not, and Claire would have told him if he was, but these people are just too scared to see reason. Claire initially tells him to get lost, but the kid is just too persistent, so she keeps him on as her personal cook to keep him from getting himself killed. The two travel together with no real destination. Claire goes wherever the organization tells her to go. They encounter many Yoma as you might expect, but also a Claymore who's gone past her limit and will soon turn into a Yoma. You see, these lovely ladies are actually pretty nasty on the inside. They were orphaned little girls who were taken in by the organization and experimented on, cut open and filled with the flesh of Yoma so that they would become half Yoma themselves. This allows them to use Yoki to enhance their physical abilities, but it comes at a cost. If they use too much at any given time, it's game over. They'll go from half Yoma to full Yoma and be hunted down by the organization. Claymores can also tell when they're about to hit their limit, so when the time comes, they can choose their own executioner by sending the black card inside their swords to the person they want to deal the death blow. Claire receives one such card from an old friend, and though Rocky begs her not to go through with it, Claire pushes him off without a word and does her job. Now, Vatican II quite explicitly condemns euthanasia, so Claire's gotta go to church. The holy city of Rabanno is home to the grandest cathedral in all the continent. However, they don't like Claymores. But when a Yoma infiltrates the church and starts eating people inside the cathedral, one of the priests sends a request to the organization for help. Claire needs to kill the demon, but since the city views her as a demon too, she takes some pills to suppress her yoki, which lets her blend in. This does make it more difficult for her to track down her target, but luckily the monster isn't very subtle. However, she nearly dies protecting her persecutors and the Yoma gets away. She sleeps off her stabbing and tells the priest it's high time to do away with discretion. They line everybody up in the cathedral and Claire scans each one of them to see if they're human or a Jesuit. But when Claire finishes scanning every person in the room, she realizes none of them are Yoma. And the reason for that is because the Yoma has been hiding out in a coffin in the off-limits baptismal area, which of course is where Rocky happens to be hanging out. Claire and the others make it in time, and once the Claymore whips out her namesake, which had been stored in a hollowed-out statue carried by Rocky, she finally kills the Yoma. But the battle took too high a toll on her. She ended up using too much yoki and now can't stop herself from turning into the very thing she just killed. She asked the guards to kill her while she's still human, but just like with the other Claymore who asked the same thing, Rocky begs Claire not to go through with this. Again, she doesn't listen. She's made up her mind. She needs to die here. She needs to stay human. So Rocky decides to die with her. All he wanted to do was help her and be by her side. He's already lost everything he cared about. His family's dead, his village threw him out, he's got nowhere to go and nothing to live for. So if this is it for Claire, then this is it for him too. That's when something happens. Or rather, something doesn't happen. Claire stays human. She knows she went past her limit, but for whatever reason, she was able to come back. Truly, nothing ever happens. But believe it or not, something did happen once before. A long time ago, back when Claire was just a little lass. She met a Claymore named Teresa who was tall, fair, and strong. Stronger than anyone else by far. They only happened to meet by chance when Teresa dispatched with a group of Yoma hiding out in a village. Claire had been the plaything of one of these Yoma, and once she was freed, she wanted to stay by her savior's side. However, Teresa was a career woman through and through, so she wasn't interested in kids. But just like with Rocky, Claire is persistent, and eventually, Teresa starts to warm up to this cute little nuisance after traveling together with her for a while. However, Teresa is still a Claymore at the end of the day, which is a very dangerous line of work, and certainly no place for a child. So after clearing out some Yoma in a nearby town, she leaves Claire in the company of a lovely elderly couple. Unfortunately, now that the surrounding Yoma have all been defeated, the town was ripe for a raiding. By the time Teresa realizes this and returns to rescue Claire, the place is engulfed in flame and most of the inhabitants are already dead. But not Claire, she's still alive, although she is a slave now. This upsets Teresa. Now, I need to mention that Claymores are strictly forbidden from killing humans. It's a hard, fast rule with no exceptions. Any Claymore who breaks this rule will be executed by the organization. So Teresa breaks the rule and kills pretty much everyone, even the leader of the raiders who thought he was the main character and died in like 5 seconds. But a man from the organization watched the whole thing unfold, so Teresa is officially condemned as a traitor and scheduled for execution. Most Claymores are good little girls who will just turn themselves in and let justice be served. But Teresa, she isn't like the other Claymores. She's always been a bit of a troublemaker, someone who's too smart for her own good. And also, she's the strongest Claymore of all time. But that's not why she rebels this time. Teresa, for all of her life, never had anything to live for. She was just a weapon for the organization, and she didn't have a problem with that until she met Claire. Now, she's got something to live for. So when it comes time for her execution, she decides to live. She and Claire go on the run, and the top 5 Claymores, excluding Teresa of course, are sent after them. They manage to track down the former number 1 and launch an all-out attack, but despite having the numbers and plenty of skill, Teresa is just too powerful. The only Claymore who stands a chance against her is the new number 2, Priscilla, a rookie who just signed up the other day who only the former number 2, Elena, seems to know about. Her raw power is terrifying. She's as dangerous as she is ditzy. But even she's bested by Teresa. However, Teresa doesn't kill her. She recognizes that Priscilla will be stronger than her at some point and that it's best to nip this thing in the bud, but she shows mercy instead, something the old her would never do. It's only because she's met Claire that she's changed her disposition. Frustrated at how a Claymore would go against the sole organization which exists to slay Yoma, Priscilla unleashes her Yoki in a righteous rage and starts her attack up once more. But because she's still a rookie, she doesn't know her own limit. She goes over the edge and starts transforming into a Yoma, begging Teresa to kill her, to end her life while her heart is still human. And Teresa obliges. She takes a step towards this scared and confused girl, and Priscilla takes her hands off with a single slash. And before Teresa has any time to process what just happened, Priscilla slashes once more and takes her head. As Teresa falls to the ground, Priscilla completes her transformation into a Yoma. The 3 surviving Claymores attack, but each of them is killed in a matter of seconds. Then she turns to Claire, who's down on the ground, frozen in fear, and she walks right past her and flies off. It's like Claire is so weak, so insignificant that Priscilla can't even see her. After a minute, Claire can finally move. She goes to what's left of Teresa and takes it into her arms. Then she goes back to the village and searches for the man in black who accompanied the Claymores. And when she finds him, she tells him to put Teresa's flesh and blood inside her so she can carry on Teresa's legacy and kill Priscilla. Back in the present, Claire gets assigned to a special hunting party that's gonna fight an awakened being. Now, these are monsters far stronger than your typical Yoma. Claire believed the Yoma from the cathedral to be an awakened being due to its high strength and massive appetite, but her handler, Rubel, clears things up for her. That guy was just a normal Yoma who happened to be on the strong side. A true awakened being would have killed Claire in a matter of seconds. By the way, awakened beings are sometimes called voracious eaters because the organization cares about optics. They tell the public these voracious eaters are ancient Yoma who have honed their skills and developed a greater hunger for human innards. But in reality, they're Claymores who passed their limits and awakened. If the commoners knew that these Yoma were past Claymores, it would complicate things. People might start to question the good nature of the organization. The team Claire is assigned to is led by Myria, number 6 in the organization. There's also Helen, number 22, and Deneva, or Deneve, or something else. Look, I'll be honest, half these names are beyond me. They call her Deneva in the anime, so we'll go with that. She's number 15.
Burger King foot lettuce.
Snap back to reality.
As for Claire, her number is 47. And if you remember from earlier, there are only 47 Claymores in total, meaning that Claire is the weakest Claymore in the organization. Which makes a lot of sense because unlike other Claymores who are half human and half Yoma, Claire never received any Yoma flesh. What she got was the remains of a Claymore. That means she's only a quarter Yoma, and since all the Claymore's strength comes from their Yoma half, the game was kinda rigged from the start. This is why her teammates don't really like her. She's not Nakama, she's just a nuisance.
That's right. Out of all of us, your friend here is the weakest one of all, hence her ranking at the bottom.
They also don't like Rocky. They ditch the kid at an inn and do a little team-building exercise with Claire before coming face-to-face with their target, who isn't just an awakened being. He's a male awakened being. Now, how is that possible if all Claymores are females? Well, it's because that wasn't always the case. Originally, men were Claymores too, but they weren't so good at not awakening. You see, the act of awakening feels very similar to a climax of a sexual nature, which is exactly why modern Claymores are all women. Because as we all know, the female orgasm doesn't exist. It is a myth created by Satanists and communists in the 1960s to destabilize the nuclear family and dismantle Western civilization. But that is a topic outside the scope of this video. The point is, there's a very real war between edgers and gooners. Myria and Deneva have faced a few awakened beings before, but never a male, since those ones tend to be pretty rare and also a lot more powerful. Which is why this fight goes sideways before it even really starts.
You get up!
But now each lady has some luck in the form of their special techniques. Helen has some stretchy arms, Deneva can regenerate insanely quickly, and Myria has the typical anime teleports behind you jutsu. These abilities help to keep them in the fight, but their opponent is just too strong. While the girls get slapped around, the organization observes the situation from a safe distance thanks to the number 3 Claymore, Galatea. Her Yoki detection powers are far superior to anyone else. She's got insane range and she can even make out little movements too. And she's surprised to sense that the weakest Claymore is actually doing pretty alright. Claire is somehow able to dodge all the attacks. It's like she knows where this guy is going to hit before he even does anything. And Miria realizes why that is. Claire might not be the strongest in a straight up fight as she doesn't have a flashy technique, but that's because the only thing she's been training ever since she became a Claymore was the one thing that would help her find Priscilla, her ability to detect Yoki. It's an ability that becomes all the more effective against awakened beings, because normal Yoma try to suppress their Yoki so they can get the drop on people, but awakened beings, they don't care about subtlety, they just let it all hang out.
That's a penis!
Meaning the stronger Claire's opponent, the easier it is for her to read their attacks. But she's still not strong enough on her own to deal a fatal blow. However, she's not alone. After the fight is finished, Miria gathers the gals around for a little chat. She believes this was a setup by the organization based on her own knowledge of the shady business that goes on behind closed doors. Also, this awakened being said some cryptic things and suggested these ladies weren't the first Claymores sent to their deaths due to being troublemakers. As it turns out, every member of this hunting party has pissed off the organization in one way or another. But there's something else too. Helen and Denova's abilities aren't typical Claymore abilities. They're Yoma abilities, and the two women confirm what Miria had suspected. They passed their limits some time ago, but didn't awaken. Claire informs them that this also happened to her, but Miria believes they actually did awaken. Just not fully, which is why they're closer to a Yoma than a Claymore right now. She warns them that the organization will probably try to get them killed again, although they should still be fine, for a while at least, as long as they don't make any waves going forward. Each of them vow to keep their discussion a secret and to play dumb with the organization while Miria continues her investigation of what's truly going on. Also, Miria tells them to stay clear of the top 5 Claymores, since those ladies are a little unpredictable and super strong, especially number 4, Ophelia. Claire runs into Ophelia on her next mission. The two of them are supposed to take down an awakened being together, but Ophelia is more interested in torturing Claire and Rocky. Now, to be fair, she does tell Claire that she smells an awful lot like an awakened being, which is why she doesn't really trust her, but given her sadistic nature, it sounds more like an excuse than an explanation. Even when the actual awakened being shows up, Ophelia just keeps playing around with Claire and company. But Claire is able to get away thanks to that awakened being holding up Ophelia for a minute, and I do mean like a minute. Ophelia single-handedly smites the thing, even after getting her own neck snapped. The lady is crazy. Claire knows she can't outrun her, so she tells Rocky they need to split up. He's not about it, so she gives him a little Misato motivation and then takes off. Ophelia catches up quickly and butchers Claire in an instant. But this was part of her plan. She let herself get nearly killed so that Ophelia would believe she actually did kill her and leave. But it didn't work, and as a result, Claire loses her sword arm permanently. She attempts to fight back with her other hand, but it's just pathetic, so Ophelia decides to stop playing around and finally put her down for good. But that is when Alina arrives, a Claymore who officially died against Priscilla, but apparently survived. She thought she sensed Teresa, which made her a little confused because Teresa is supposed to be dead, but once she sees Claire, she understands the situation. She easily repels Ophelia with her quicksword technique and brings the weakest Claymore back to her hideout for some training. Unfortunately, Claire isn't very good with the quicksword technique, so Alina decides to give her a hand. She doesn't really need it anymore, and she feels kind of ashamed of herself for running away from the fight all those years ago and living in hiding ever since. Claire thanks her and then leaves to finish her fight with Ophelia and then find Rocky and, eventually kill Priscilla. God willing. And she left just in time because number 5, Rafaela, arrives moments later. She sensed Alina's Yoki from all the training, does a little foreshadowing that never gets paid off in the anime, and then executes her for deserting the organization. Claire runs into Ophelia, who looks a little bit different from before. She got so mad from her defeat that she turned into a snake lady, although she doesn't actually realize she's awakened until she sees her own reflection. Claire is able to defeat her thanks to her new quicksword technique, but the fight wasn't exactly a real fight. Ophelia had already lost lost the will to win, but regardless, Claire just beat another awakened being, and she was now more powerful than ever. However, she's no longer a part of the organization. She knows she didn't end up playing duos with the most unhinged of the top 5 because of bad luck. The organization is trying to quietly take her out, so she travels around in disguise, suppressing her yoki and even stretching her own vocal cords to sound more like a man, all to keep the organization in the dark concerning her movements. But this doesn't last long once a group of Claymores hunting a nearby awakened being all go missing, save for one who's screaming bloody murder, begging for help. Claire can't help but answer the call and ends up fighting a massive awakened being named Dalf, who serves a little girl named Rifu. But despite her unthreatening appearance, this little girl is one of the most powerful Yoma on the continent, an awakened being that is in its own category. She is an abyssal one, and there are 2 others just like her. One of whom is named Easley, and he's up in the north putting together an army, which is why Rifu is also putting together an army by gathering up Claymores and forcing them to awaken. As Claire continues to mildly annoy the behemoth serving Rifu, another Claymore calmly enters the scene, the same one who had been monitoring Claire and the others during that one bout with the awakened being. It's Galatea, and she nearly kills this monster all on her own using her yoki manipulation technique, but Rifu is able to get her man in working order again. She easily sees through the technique, so Galatea tells Claire they need the help of number 9, Jean, to defeat this guy. But Jean is currently going through a metamorphosis, and by the time Claire gets to her, Jean has already awakened. Claire doesn't give up though. She hits her with affirmations and a big motivational speech, and Jean, through the power of friendship and magic, and by linking with Claire's yoki signature, reverts back to normal. The 2 of them go back to Galatea, and the 3 of them nearly kill Dalf. But then Rifu decides to finally get involved. But she doesn't kill them, she only stops the fight and tells them they're free to go. After all, she's not interested in killing them, she just needs allies. I mean, she will still kill you if you turn out to be a weak ally, but that doesn't apply to anyone still alive. As a show of good faith, she even gives Claire one piece of crucial information. Easley has in his possession a great and powerful weapon that might just bring the organization to its knees: Priscilla.
Well then, warriors, we shall meet again.
With the battle ended, Galatea reveals the real reason she showed up. It wasn't to assist the Claymores in need, it was to bring Claire in, dead or alive. Jean is not happy about this. She owes her life to Claire and isn't about to let anything happen to her. So Galatea decides to just lie and tell the organization that they got buried in the rubble or something. This does not fool the organization, and they find Claire and Jean pretty quickly. But instead of killing them, they get an official pardon for their past crimes so long as they go north. Easley has finally made his move, and these 2 need to join an army of Claymores to defend the continent from his invasion. Rubel also mentions that Rocky has been spotted up there too. So Claire and Jean head north and meet with this army of 24 Claymores, which includes Helen, Deneva, and Miria. But it's not exactly a happy reunion given the circumstances. Miria flatly tells them this operation has absolutely no chance of success. The organization is just buying time, and their lives are the price. It doesn't take too long for Easley to attack. The Claymores ward off 3 advancing awakened beings with no fatalities, but that was simply a scouting party. When Easley sends out his real force, led by his second in command, Rigaldo, the silver-eyed Lion King, things get real bad real quick. He immediately discerns who the Claymore captains are and picks them off one after another. 2 of the captains are killed just like that, and another is sliced in half when she attempts to stop him. The only remaining captain is Miria, but she's no match for Rigardo. No one is, except for Claire, once she goes past her limit. Now this is the point where the anime and the manga diverge. Up until episode 24, things have been, mostly the same between the 2 versions. The anime reorders some of the stuff at the start, like having Rocky join with Claire from the very beginning instead of saving that for slightly later, but most of the differences are small and unimportant. They don't really change the core story. But the manga hadn't finished yet, so Madhouse was presented with a choice. They could either go the filler route and wait for the manga to get a little further along, or they could go the anime-only ending route and just conclude things on their own terms. Yes, technically they could have just stopped at the last finished arc from the manga and started the anime up again once there was more material, but that would mean this anime wouldn't cover what is arguably Claymore's second best arc. Plus, they would have to make more filler to round out the 26 episode count, and they really didn't want to do that. Going into it, Madhouse didn't know how big of a demand for a continuation would be. If they went the anime-only route, they ruined any chance of a season 2. But if they followed the manga, then they'd have to end things on a cliffhanger. So Madhouse opted for the middle path. something that is original to the anime, but still lends itself to a faithful continuation if that should happen. Now I'm gonna go ahead and finish up this version of the story and then break down the whole anime and then move on to the manga stuff. Claire is able to awaken parts of her body without fully passing the point of no return. With her legs now awakened, she can blitz Rigardo, but because she's only partially awakened, she's not very good at fine-tuning her movements and ends up hurting herself. After some trial and error though, she figures herself out and cuts him into a million bite-sized pieces. But she gooned a little too hard dealing the final blow, and now she's turning into a monster, like for real this time. Or at least she would have if Priscilla hadn't shown up. Claire's rage keeps her from fully awakening, and the two of them fight inside a nearby volcano. But Claire isn't strong enough to win. Helen, Deneva, and Miria make it to the fight and give it their best shot as well, but all they manage to do is bring out Priscilla's second form, which looks like, that. This causes Claire to also transform into, this. And the two creatures battle it out with everything they've got, until Claire throws down her enemy and prepares to execute her. But she's stopped by Rocky. Now, I didn't mention it, but he had been chilling in the north for a little while and ran into a strange girl and a highly skilled warrior, Priscilla and Easley respectively. They treated him well even after he accidentally found out their true nature, but he left after he heard that Claire was also in the north. He ran into Jean, who was mortally wounded by Rigardo, and the two of them walked to the volcano where everything's going down. Rocky tells Claire not to do this. If she kills Priscilla, she'll be no better than her. She'll be a monster for the rest of her life. The only way to come back is to let her go. Claire stabs him, but Jean gets in the way. She tells her they need to match their yoki like they did before, and Claire will go back to normal. Claire tells her that doing this will kill Jean, but Jean tells her she's already dead, so this is the only way to make her death mean something. Claire still protests though, saying that if she can't kill Priscilla, then what's even the point of living? And Jean's like, "You're an idiot. Life is a beautiful thing, and even if you don't know what to live for right now, as long as you keep on living, you can figure it out later. But more importantly, sweetheart, there are people in this world who want to see you live. People who gave their lives so you could live. So live."
Just live, please, Claire. I'm glad that we were friends.
They both link up and Claire is human once more, but Jean dies. And as for Priscilla, well, Easley swoops in and scoops her up and congratulates the Claymores on a well-fought battle. Then he just leaves. Deneva and Helen decide to train in the north for a while Miria goes off to continue her investigation of the organization. As for Claire and Rocky, they bury Jean and decide to live a normal life, or at least as close as normal as you can get living in a winter wasteland filled with countless Yoma. But hey, that's life. The Claymore anime is fine, I guess. I mean, it's not bad, but would I call it good? I don't know, every compliment I can think of comes with a caveat. Let's start with judging this book by its cover. Claymore has a very depressing color palette. The style is muted. Every scene is a sorry combination of grays and browns and blues. And this is a positive. It absolutely fits the feel of the show. It's a bleak and brutal world. I don't want to see any sunshine and rainbows, Mom. I want death and decay, and Claymore delivers on that front. But I do wish it had more scenes like in episode 1, where it ditches the drab in favor of something saturated and loud. It does this in a handful of other scenes too, but towards the end, everything starts to blend together because it's just so dark all the time. It could have worked if they bumped up the brightness on the Yoma eyes, played around with the lighting and the shadows, but the final result is lacking in presence. Design-wise, I still haven't made up my mind if I like how the Claymores look. Now don't get me wrong, I love me a tall, beautiful Aryan princess, but a little bit of meat on the bone never hurt anyone. Alright, too much meat. I get the concept. These ladies are supposed to be angels with inner demons. It's why they wear all white and exude an otherworldly air. But I can't help but feel like their choice in apparel seems off. Again, I get it. This was something intended for teenage boys, and teenage boys like beautiful babes in skin-tight outfits. Fair enough. But why even bother with the shoulder pads? They don't seem to do much. And are these waist guards really doing anything? I get that these ladies can regenerate most of their wounds, but I still think they could have gone for something a little more practical and protective. Like Alina's outfit, but with a skirt. Then there's the fights. They look pretty stiff. More often than not, there aren't too many in-between frames, or they just opt for the old "it's so quick you can only see the silver line from the sword swings" rationale. And because so many characters have a quick gimmick, including Claire, after the halfway point, it gets old real, quick. Now I'm someone who craves that Part 1 Naruto Sasuke retrieval arc Valley of the End fight with the fluid animation and frequently off-model characters where if you pause at any moment you will see something silly, but it really doesn't matter because when it plays out in full, it is absolute kino. But that's just me. I do think Claymore has some fights that look good, they're just few and far between. Most of the time, it's static shots with motion lines. And there's too much talking and explaining in the middle of fights, it ruins the flow of things. But now, to be fair, that's not something unique to this show. I did just bring up Naruto. As for the music, it's actually not half bad. Claymore fuses together Western and Eastern aesthetics and culture, and the music does a good job reflecting this slightly Japanese medieval Europe. The opening and the ending songs are also both worth mentioning, but pretty much all of the songs on the soundtrack are like 1 to 2 minutes long, which means you very often will hear the same song over and over and over again, and it can make you dislike it. But the song that plays when Priscilla first awakens and kills the other Claymores, I mean that one is phenomenal. It's got like this tribal vocal track with some Eastern flair. I really like it, and I'm glad they didn't spam this song every chance they got. It makes this moment so much more special and gripping. The characters of Claymore are certainly there, but are they really the main draw? Not really. Most of them can be adequately described with a couple of adjectives. Silent and cold, casual and loud, calm and collected, stoic and steadfast, you get the idea. I don't think this is necessarily a problem. In fact, some of these guys, or should I say gals, are pretty cool and I liked whenever they were on screen. But there are other characters that, they didn't really do much for me. Rocky is pretty annoying. He was always preaching and crying and simping, and it can get a little grating after a while. Which is a problem because the whole show revolves around his dynamic with Claire. He's the one who anchors her humanity. She cares for him in the same way that Teresa cared for her. It's like poetry or something. Actually, it's a slightly different relationship, but the core idea is the same. But the emotional climax of the show didn't hit me as hard as it should have because I just wasn't too fond of the kid. And I also wasn't that fond of Claire. I don't think she's annoying like Rocky, but she's not really memorable as a character. She's very robotic and passive. She initially seems like an emotionless weapon, and you'd expect her arc to be about her learning it's okay to feel, but that's not really what happens. She's actually pretty snarky and self-aware, at least for a certain arc.
ビキは逃げて女が犠牲になるところだった。それに対してはどう言い繕うつもりだ。
ちょうどお前たちが来る方向だったんでな。もたもたしなければ間に合うだろうと思っていた。
Try me, bitch. More often than not, she's cold and curt, but she still puts her life on the line for the little guy because she wants to do the right thing. And this makes her really predictable and boring and weak. Not just physically, like as a character. She's poorly written. What's Claire's motivation, her main goal? Well, for the first few episodes, she's just doing her job, or at least that's what she claims. Later, you learn she's actually fighting Yoma to strengthen herself so she can avenge Teresa. But at the same time, she's willing to throw down her life for complete strangers, or even allow herself to be killed rather than turn into a monster. Those two things are totally fine on their own, very heroic in fact, but also a missed opportunity to better define Claire. The show wants you to think that Claire is reckless and will do whatever it takes to kill Priscilla on her quest for revenge, but it also wants her to stay the virtuous maiden who only ever does the right thing. There are no real consequences to her actions, despite the inherent conflict between her good nature and her bloodthirsty goal, and I do call it a bloodthirsty goal because the show wants you to think of it that way. It wants you to think that Claire is losing herself along the way and turning into a monster just like the one that started her quest to begin with. But I just never saw that. What I saw was a girl who helped others and then acted like a tsundere about it. A girl who willingly allowed herself to be executed and her quest for revenge abandoned when she passed her limit, rather than turn into a monster and potentially hurt innocent people. I saw a girl who, sure, got a little crazy whenever someone name-dropped Priscilla, but could always snap out of it with a little help. There was one instance of Claire doing something arguably bad, which couldn't be immediately undone, and that was when she followed her orders and executed a Claymore who had gone past her limit. But Claire never really reflects on this, even though the two of them were friends. It's really only a moment to show the audience the stakes, to reinforce the grimdark setting and brutal tone. You see, there isn't that much to Claire, and what is there just isn't handled in a very interesting way. Is she a fine protagonist for a weekly sword and sorcery action adventure show? Sure, I guess so. And if Claymore stayed episodic like those early episodes, I probably wouldn't be complaining that much. But once the Teresa arc kicks off, it stops being episodic. It introduces the final boss and the main character's main motivation, and honestly, I think it was a great move. I'm sure many people will express a similar sentiment here, but Claymore, for me at least, really only started with the Teresa arc. The stuff that comes before is fine, but this was the first arc where I started to feel invested in the show's story and its characters. It was the first arc that actually blindsided me. I really did not expect Teresa to go out like that. In that moment, I felt Claire's rage and her fear. You gotta understand, up until this point, the Yoma, I mean, they all look pretty meh, to be honest. Not very intimidating, just lanky and PG-13 scary at best. But Priscilla is just different, and the Yoma that show up after her continue the trend. The show handles this transition very well for certain things, but unfortunately the narrative falls off by the end. There is no real emotional payoff. Claire does go through a transformation, but it's from a character who is potentially pretty interesting to a character that is really not that interesting. And that's probably because of how this show ended. The final arc is pretty disappointing. I already talked about how it doesn't look all that great, but the bigger issue is what actually happens. The handful of fights with the army of Claymores is underwhelming, and the final fight with Priscilla is not really what I wanted to see. It feels a lot like Dragon Ball with the transformations, and Priscilla's final form looks like a cursed second form. This design was already peak, why did you change it? How did they describe it in the English DVD commentary?
Yeah.
Priscilla's terrifying.
Yeah.
And yet she's still hot. How did he...
Couldn't have said it better myself. There was really no reason to change it. I mean, bigger doesn't always mean better. At least I hope not. Claire's awakened form is alright, but I don't know, I just didn't feel anything watching this fight. And the conclusion with the revenge bad message just falls flat. You cannot convince me that these two are basically the same, and that if Claire takes her life, she'll be no different from Priscilla. I fail to see how killing one of the most dangerous Yoma out there, who has already eaten a bunch of people, including your pseudo-older sister, is the one thing that'll complete your own transformation into a monster. I mean, maybe I'd believe it if Claire didn't always find a way to come back. But actually, you know what? I still wouldn't, because on this channel, we believe the Book of Joshua happened and that they deserved it. Oh, but I didn't choose this life. It really sucks for me. I'm a victim and I don't want to be the monster anymore.
This'll fix it.
I guess I could mention the English dub. It's not the way I'd recommend watching Claymore, but, you know, that's okay. Fuck you! I think the sub voices fit each character more, so that's really why I just stick with that version. Also, because dubs suck, am I right, fellow purist? But the dub does do something that's pretty cool with the Yoma. In the sub, most of them sound kinda whack, to be honest. I feel like this is the thing with Japanese monster stuff, but the demented voices these guys take on usually sound pretty silly, almost like they have their mouth full or something. It's just not very threatening. But in the dub, they have several different voices layered on top to give it that creepy, demonic sound, and I much prefer that approach.
I had planned to stay much longer in your little village, but you just had to send out that little silver-eyed witch!
Some people find Rocky's dub voice to be unbearable, but I don't know, he's pretty annoying in both versions, so I don't really see much of a difference. I'm sure you've noticed this by now, but I've said quite a lot of negative things and not so many positive things about Claymore. You might even be wondering why I made a retrospective on this series when it seems like I don't like it very much. And that's just it. If Claymore was only this anime, then I wouldn't be making this video. I don't think Claymore is something you should go out of your way to watch. It's something you should go out of your way to read. And this is something you should go out of your way to sign up for. This video is sponsored by Sakurako and Tokyo Treat. Sakurako is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box subscription service that sends you a box filled with 20 traditional, authentic artisan Japanese snacks right to your door. Observe the particulars of this Sakurako box. It'll be different depending on the theme, which changes every month. This is the box for the month of November, and the theme is Heart of Ishikawa. The Ishikawa Prefecture is a region renowned for its rich heritage, skilled artisans, and breathtaking landscapes. But with the devastation caused by the earthquake of 2024, this region has faced many challenges which threaten to disrupt Ishikawa's traditions and the livelihoods of those who live there. That's why for the month of November, Sakurako is lending its hand to raise awareness and support for the artisans and the communities of the Noto Peninsula. And you can do your part by enjoying a mindfully curated collection of snacks, all locally crafted straight from Ishikawa. The snacks include Kintsuba, Hojicha Kinako Mochi, Earl Grey and Gorojima cakes, Noto sweet potato, Yuzu senbei, shrimp flour senbei, sesame senbei, Oh wait, that's just sesame. My bad. I like this one a lot, nice and crispy. Less crispy was the grape jelly. It was sweet and refreshing. Now it's called grape jelly, but I do believe I detected trace amounts of orange and peach, and I'm definitely not just saying that because the booklet told me. By the way, did I mention that each box comes with some special Japanese tableware? This time it's a pair of chopsticks. Now I'll admit, I'm not too great with chopsticks, but now that I've got a pair of my own, I'm pretty confident my skills will improve. As expected, the Japanese tea is very calming and very aristocratic. Of course, there are other snacks in the box, but you get the idea by now. It's all good. And you can consult the booklet on any given item to make sure you don't eat anything you might be allergic to. There's also some interesting reading material you can go through while you eat and drink and ignore the girlfriend you don't have. So sign up for a subscription by clicking the link in the description below and using my code. This does help the channel out, and I wouldn't have taken the sponsorship if I didn't actually like these snack boxes. And now back to the video. Norihiro Yagi was no stranger to writing manga before Claymore. His very first manga was a one-shot released in 1990 called Undead Man. It was a horror comedy filled with slapstick and sadism, which earned Yagi the 32nd Akasuka Award. This was not a nothing award either, okay? Other winners included the artist of the One Punch Man manga. Yagi's next manga didn't disappoint either, Angel Densetsu. It's another comedy with some horror, but also a little down-to-earth high school drama as well. It ran for 15 volumes from 92 to 2000, and I think it ended in a satisfying way. I didn't read it. But Yagi didn't want to settle for a modest success, so the very next year, he made the manga you're here for. Instead of continuing with the comedy, Yagi decided to double down on the horror. He had already gotten pretty good at drawing creepy faces and mangled corpses, so it seemed like the right move. Plus, he was interested in leaving the real world for fantasy, something vaguely European. He was a big fan of JRPGs, and he just got back from another trip around France. And if you know anything about Paris syndrome, then that's probably why Claymore is so horrific. When making the manga, Yagi didn't have it all figured out at the start. He prioritized art over arcs, but he did have a general outline of what kind of story he wanted to tell. The reason he put so much emphasis on the art is because, well, he's crazy and hates cutting corners, but also because what he cared about most was the contrast on the page. Graceful, beautiful women fighting ugly, disgusting monsters. This was the core idea behind Claymore, and also something he wanted to play around with, which is why Claymores are what they are, Yoma innards and all. Now, the manga is pretty dense, lots of characters and new developments from the anime and whatnot, so in the interest of time, broad strokes. Where we left off was the war in the north. The Claymore captains had all been killed save for Miria, and Claire had partially awakened parts of her body to fight the one responsible. And after awakening more and more of herself, she slices the Silver-Eyed Lion King to bits just like in the anime. And just like in the anime, she accidentally went past her limit and can't turn back. But unlike in the anime, Priscilla doesn't show up. She stays with Rocky and Easily on the outskirts of town. Jean still sacrifices herself to bring Claire back from the edge. It just happens in the town, not a nearby volcano. But even though Claire is back to normal, most of the Claymores are dead, and the Yoma army is still very much alive. The girls make a last stand against the demon horde while Priscilla sheds tears from miles away. She can sense the Claymores falling one by one until finally, there aren't any left. The town of Pita has fallen, and the Yoma march down south right to the organization's doorstep, where the mysterious men in black reveal their trump card, Alicia, the #1 fighter of this generation who fights alongside her twin sister Beth, the #2 fighter. These two are the latest experiment by the organization. The twins are linked to each other so that one can fully awaken while the other one focuses on bringing them back. Essentially, you get all the pros of awakening without any of the cons. The results speak for themselves. But Isley wasn't in this battle. He headed to the territory of Luciella of the South, the third creature of the Abyss. And the two duel it out until Luciella ran away, right to Rafaela, who had been sent by the organization to deal with her sister. She embraces her and immobilizes her. Meanwhile, Refool shows up to kill the injured Easily, but since Priscilla's still alive, that doesn't happen. Speaking of people who are still alive, you guessed it, Claire is still kicking, along with some familiar names like Miria, Deneva, and Helen, and some new ones like Cynthia, Tabitha, and Yuma. These 7 are all that remain of the 24 in the north. They are the ghosts that will haunt the Yoma and the organization alike. If you're wondering how they survived before the main battle, all the Claymores took half of a Yoki suppressant pill, which would be fully effective only after they lost consciousness. Faking their own deaths was really the only option they had. It didn't work for most of them, but, originally everyone was gonna die, so the plan was pretty successful if you ask me. These lucky 7 stay in the north under the radar, training in harsh conditions organization so that when the time comes, they'll be ready for anything. And that time does come when Claire and Yuma go out on patrol and stumble upon a destroyed town with a jail cell that appears to have a message left by Rocky. By the way, I should mention, in the manga, Rocky's brought to the north by slavers before he meets Easley. Anyway, Claire decides to track him down, and Miria decides to take the organization down. Claire also wants to avenge her sisters, though, so the 7 ghosts stick together and head down south in their stylish new outfits. They wear black because they're in mourning. Or because it looks cool, I don't know if they ever give a real reason. Almost immediately, they run into Rifu and have to aggressively rescue some of their former comrades. But Claire hangs back to talk tea with her old gal pal. The Beast fills her in on what's been going on for the last 7 years since Easley invaded. Essentially, the world's pretty scuffed and Rifu is still looking for some Claymore allies to defeat Priscilla and kill Easley. Together, they could conquer the world if left unchecked, and since the organization doesn't like Rifu, her list of allies is pretty thin. She extends the offer to Claire once again, but gets turned down once again. The rogue Claymores interrogate one of the surviving loyal Claymores and discover that Galatea deserted the organization 7 years ago too, during the whole Easley incident. Claire and company decide to look for her, but they aren't alone on that venture. Clarice is also looking for Galatea. Don't remember her? Well, that's because you shouldn't, she's new, and she's replaced Claire as number 47. What an accomplishment. But what's interesting about her is that she still has her natural hair color. This happens from time to time with the washouts. Not every girl who undergoes the Claymore treatment makes it through the process. Many of them simply die once the Yoma flesh is put inside of them. Clarice only exists because the organization has a personnel shortage thanks to the Northern Campaign, but she does still have her uses. The main one being that of caretaker for the highly experimental Miyata, the new number 4, who's also like 4 years old. Alright, she's not that young, but could have fooled me. Clarice and Miyata figure out Galatea is hiding out as a nun in the holy city of Robana, right around the time a dangerously naked awakened being named Agatha attacks the city. It turns into a messy brawl, but the 7 ghosts arrive and save the day. Clarice isn't sure how to handle the situation since technically everyone here is a traitor to the organization, which means execution is proper, but she can't bring herself to do the job now. So Miria convinces her to join her crew instead. And after a little chit-chat with Galatea, Miria spills the beans on everything she's learned about the organization to everyone. For starters, the organization made the Yoma. Additionally, the main continent they live on is just one little island in a big old world. The real main continent is far away and in a constant state of war. In fact, that's why the Yoma and the Claymores and the Awakened Beings all exist. They're all just biological weapons developed by one side to potentially use against the other. The island they've been living on for their whole life is nothing more than a test site. Once the organization figures out how to make a controllable awakened being with the power of an abyssal one, it'll be over for basically everyone. Which is why they absolutely need to destroy the organization before that happens. It's basically a suicide mission, so Miria tells everyone they should get their affairs in order before they head out so no one dies with any regrets. Helen and Deneva decide to check out their hometowns, and Claire figures it's high time to find Rocky, who seems to be out in the west somewhere. Miria also sends Cynthia and Uma with her because otherwise Claire will do something stupid. And Miria and Tabitha decide to stay in the city with Galatea, Clarice, and Miyata and make sure nothing bad happens to the city before everyone returns. And elsewhere, bad things are happening. Rifu actually got her hands on the fused corpse of Rafaela and Luciella, and she's trying to wake it up using a Galatea tier Claymore she just captured. She believes this husk is the only thing that'll be strong enough to wipe out all of her enemies. While that's going on, Claire runs into a hard R, but it's not Rocky, it's Rubel. He tells her the organization is aware of their movements, but he's not there to bring them in or anything like that because, well, he's not really on the organization's side. He's been leaking information to Miria this whole time, but not because he's seen the error of the organization's ways or anything like that. It's because he's a double agent from the main continent, and his mission is to have the organization destroy itself from the inside because of its own research. That way they'll abandon the experiments and his nation won't have to deal with any biological superweapons back home. Now, he's not exactly an ally to Claire and her friends. In fact, he's basically just playing every angle so he comes out on top. But he does give Claire more info, even though it's just so she'll get herself killed. It's about Rifu and what she's doing and how they really need to put a stop to it. While that's all going on, Helen and Deneva make a new friend on their adventure who tells them to avoid the south if they know what's good for them. But that only gets them curious, so they check it out and run into Easley of all people, who's just strolling around the city looking worse for wear. There's a bit of a fight, but it ended quickly, not by Helen or Deneva, who were both incredibly outclassed, but by an army of zombie claymores called Abyss Feeders who, Well, you guessed it, they feed on creatures of the abyss. These zombies were another one of the organization's recent experiments. They were girls who were given the flesh of awakened beings instead of just typical Yoma flesh. They have absolutely no will of their own, but they're incredibly resilient and very hungry. They've also been attacking Easley on and off again for years now, never giving him enough time to heal his wounds from the previous battle. You'll notice Rocky and Priscilla aren't with him. Easley sent them away after the Abyssal Feeders first showed up. The three of them had actually been living a peaceful life as a family. A fake family, but a pretty happy one. You see, Easley never actually wanted to take over the world. He was content to kick back in the north till the end of time, but everything changed when he met Priscilla. She was unlike any foe he had ever faced before. In an instant, she nearly killed him. However, she had some serious mental issues and barely had any idea what she was even doing. She just wanted to find her father, who, if you're wondering, she killed before she became a Claymore. Easley takes advantage of her delusions and pledges himself to her and her goal, which required an invasion force, otherwise the organization might stop them. But after defeating Luciella, the situation changed. There was no longer any being or potential alliance of parties that could threaten Priscilla and Easley, which is why they decided to just settle down in the south for a while. Priscilla even stopped eating human guts, and Rocky may have had something to do with that, but it's all in the past now. In the present, Easley is miserable and tired and alone, and the strongest of the Abyssals goes out not with a bang, but with a whimper. Helen and Deneva head west to Claire, but send their new friend to Miria with a message about the Abyssal Feeders and Easley's fate. Alicia and Beth are also heading west, meaning the organization is trying to eliminate the last remaining creature of the Abyss. Claire tracks down Rifu's new hideout and fights her way inside, but only to lure Rifu outside. The captive Claymore escapes, but the fused corpse wakes up. Rafaela reaches out to Claire's mind and tells her that things are about to get real bad unless they merge together. Claire receives the memories and emotions of Rafaela and now has to fight against that fused corpse, which finally woke up and turned into the Destroyer. At the same time, the Abyssal Feeders arrive and go to town on Rifu and her man. Alicia and Beth also arrive with them just to make sure things end quickly. But then the Destroyer shoots out waves of rods, which are basically parasitic awakened beings, and one of those rods hits Beth, which causes her to awaken, and because she's linked to Alicia, she also awakens. And then Priscilla shows up, because when it rains, it pours. She just happened to be hanging out in the nearby town, and when she recognized a familiar scent, she sent herself into action. Also, her tummy got the rumblies. She kills almost all of the main monsters, Beth, Alicia, even Rifu. Claire senses the one-horned demon and faces off against her, but Priscilla doesn't recognize her. Claire tries to kill her anyway, but gets bodied in less than 10 seconds. So she stops edging and starts gooning. Deneva disapproves, but Claire decides this is it. She's going all out. She starts to fully awaken, but only hurts herself instead of transforming. She tries to awaken again, but it doesn't work. Not because of Priscilla or anything she's doing, but because of Jean. Claire owes Jean her life, and she knows that if she awakens after everything that's happened, Jean would never forgive her. Her last words became a sacred mantra that cannot be broken lightly, so she can't awaken anymore. Her mind simply won't let her. But luckily for Claire, Douth, who had been infected and enhanced by those parasitic rods, rushes over to beat Priscilla to a pulp. However, Priscilla is a busted character, and he's not, so he gets deleted. All he managed to do was help Priscilla regain her memories, which only made her stronger. She chases down the runaways, but the Destroyer gets to Claire first and absorbs her. Then it attacks Priscilla, allowing the girls to get away. No one really knows what's going on or what happens next, and to be honest with you, I don't really either. But it's time for a change in scenery. Back in Robana, Miria decided to take off on her own against the organization while all the big dogs headed west. She easily cuts through the army of Claymores before her, but she doesn't kill them. She just roughs them up a little bit until they can't move for a while, which shows just how unstoppable she really is. But when she makes it to the organization HQ, she sees a new set of twins who can awaken. They aren't quite on Alicia and Beth's level just yet, and Miria does do pretty well against them until number 10 uses her mind game ability to make Miria see her old friend and lower her guard. She kind of loses her grip on reality for a bit and is brutally butchered by the other Claymores. And then the organization sends some awakened beings to Robana to punish them for their treachery. Deneva, Helen, and the others make it in time for the fight and regroup once it's done, but as for Claire, well, she looks like this now. They leave her with Galatea and head over to the organization to finish what Miria started. But Miria is actually already doing that, because it turns out she's still alive. The Claymore she fought and didn't kill decided to return the favor when it came time to execute her. It may have looked really bad, and I do mean like really bad, but they didn't hit any vitals, so she's actually good to go. The civil war breaks out and the organization throws everything they have at Miria, including their latest experiment, the resurrected corpses of 3 previous number 1s. The battle is fierce and bloody and long, but basically Miria wins and the whole gang's back together. Yeah, except for Claire. But Rocky's here, and just look at that glow up. He actually showed up a while ago back in that battle in the West, but there was a lot going on, so I didn't mention it. He's been taking care of Priscilla ever since Easley sent them away, and traveling around essentially acting like a Claymore. Also, he's super jacked and cool now. But he did get hit with one of those AIDS rods, and that's about the time Priscilla took off, but not before stopping him from being HIV positive. The chief crazy scientist of the organization found him and took him back to the HQ for testing, and now we're all caught up. Miria takes a look around the HQ and finds a couple of chained up monsters and the leader of the island organization, who tells her that this thing is a dragon and the thing hanging above it is the unawakened form. These are creatures from the mainland and they're very hard to study because their bodies disintegrate almost immediately after death. But these two are just barely kept alive thanks to the Industrial Revolution and its consequences. The Elder tells Miria that the organization uses the flesh of these dragon monsters to create Yoma and that infects people in places all over the continent. Miria cuts through the life support tubes to let these creatures finally die. Then she cuts through the Elder and brings his head to the others and declares the organization officially defeated. They all decide to go back to the Holy City with Rocky since his presence could be the one thing that brings Claire back. Outside the city though, they notice a bunch of awakened beings just hanging out but not attacking. They're waiting for something. They've sensed a being far stronger than anything they've ever seen, and they're curious about that. And also about the people who finally destroyed the organization. When the heroes head inside the gates, Galatea tells them all the civilians have been evacuated. It's just soldiers and volunteers who are all prepared to die in the next fight. She also shows them what's been going on with Claire. They have no idea what's going on or how to fix it, but Rocky has an idea. He walks up and reintroduces himself, tells him that he's been looking for her for these 7 years, and he never gave up hope that she was still alive. She stabs him, but it's okay because she didn't hit anything too important. She was just trying to make sure it was really him. And after a moment, Claire flies out of the muck and into his arms, naked and bursting with emotion. And by that I mean her insides, they start falling out. The girls patch her up. This is a pretty common thing for Claymores. They usually need treatment every month or so. Oh, it's a metaphor for periods. I actually did not put that together until just now. Okay, alright, I get it. Man, women are nasty. Anyway, they have a touching reunion, but the rest of the tangled gobbledygook transforms into Priscilla. Luckily, she flies off to feast on the awakened beings outside of the city. Also, it's not just Priscilla, it's also the Destroyer. Claire, Priscilla, and the Destroyer had all merged together to end the previous battle. And now that Claire's gone, the two remaining are stuck together, fighting each other for control over the body. The Claymores launch into action to defend the city from some of the awakened beings, but then a couple of them show up not to fight, but to talk with Rocky. They noticed his chiseled physique, and he tells them that he's been trained by Easley to fight Yoma. That's when Miria shows up to interrupt the conversation and instead broker an alliance of sorts. Priscilla is stronger than anyone here, and there's also another abyssal one that was created during that last battle against the organization. She was one of the former number 1s, and because she was revived with a piece of Priscilla that they got off Rocky, she's coming towards her to be absorbed, and if that happens, then everybody dies. So the Yoma and the Claymores form an uneasy alliance to fight the one monster in the forest while somebody else shows up to fight Priscilla. It's Rifu. Sort of. She's a husk of her former self, but somehow more powerful than ever. She nearly defeats Priscilla all on her own, beating the absolute crap out of her, absorbing the stuff she spits out, but Priscilla has access to infinite energy, so she can just keep regenerating like nothing ever happened. But because she can't seem to deal a lethal blow to this husk, she actually reverts back to her human form and whips out her old Claymore. And with that, one battle ends, but another rages on in the city itself after one of the more powerful awakened beings who was supposed to be helping Miria and the others got a little hungry and went on a side quest. Miyata is able to stop her with the help of everyone there, but there are many fatalities, including Clarice. Very sad. Priscilla takes a break from fighting to snack on some bystanders. Both Rubel and the main crazy scientist had been watching the whole thing go down, but only Rubel gets away unscathed. Not that the other guy even tried to. But as Rubel flees, he spots Rocky running right towards Priscilla. She goes easy on him for a while, but then slices him silly just before Claire and the others arrive. She's basically toying with them, slowly powering up and telling them to hurry up and take her out before it's too late. Eventually, everyone ends up in the same place, and in the middle of all the carnage, a single blade pierces Priscilla's throat. It was Rocky. He was waiting for this moment. It's what easily trained him to do. And Claire capitalizes on the moment with her quick sword strike and cuts her into a million pieces. There's a little celebration, a great wave of relief, but not everyone made it out okay. Tabitha is dying. She got hit pretty badly, and with her dying breath, she tells her captain, Priscilla is still alive. And she's eating the Abyssal one and the other awakened beings, and she's basically back to full power again. Claire knows they can't defeat her now. She's not strong enough. None of them are. They need a miracle at this point, or at the very least, a hero. And that's exactly who shows up. Teresa. She's back. How? Claire awakened. That's how. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that, but I'm not going to explain it. The point is, the tables are turned. Priscilla tries her best, but she's no match for the strongest number 1 of all time. And after Teresa sprouts some wings, she easily flies towards victory. And by the end, Priscilla begs for her own death. But it's not like she's being a sore loser. A part of her has actually been trying to die this whole time, but no one was strong enough to grant her that wish. That changed today. Teresa bids Claire a final heartfelt goodbye, but Claire knows that a piece of her will always be inside her. Like literally, because Teresa's corpse is still inside Claire. It's gross. But the sentiment is very wholesome chungus. Rubel managed to survive the whole thing. Miria lets him go home, but if anyone ever invades this island again, it'll be his head. The other Claymores do a bit of drinking and merrymaking. Miria sets off to clean up any remaining awakened beings, and Claire and Rocky pay a visit to a familiar face to return something that doesn't need to be returned, it seems. And that's it. That's Claymore. I tried to summarize as best I could, but there's a lot that happens in this manga, and I even skipped over a bunch of stuff that I will bring up in a minute. First though, I just want to say, this manga is great. I have my problems with it, but the good still far outweighs the bad. Let's start with the art. It is exceptional. Or maybe I should say it becomes exceptional. I mean, for the first few chapters, it's nothing special. The faces are certainly distinct, but the main monsters are nowhere near as terrifying as they're supposed to be. A lot of the backgrounds are bland, if not just blank, but there is a fair amount of gore that adds some spectacle to the fight at least. The thing is, the art improves each volume, and by the time you get to the real main monsters of Claymore, the awakened beings, the art goes to a whole new level. I will never forget the first time I saw that awakened being from volume 6 when Claire meets Ophelia. That thing is just so unholy. I love the way it looks. It is creepy and weird and unlike anything we've seen to that point. But apparently I did forget about it because I watched the Claymore anime like 6 years ago. Wait, was it really 6 years ago? Wow, that is, I don't know how I feel about that. I remember the basic story and a couple of big events like Teresa's death, but when I got to this part in the manga, I started to ask myself, did the anime skip this or something? Because there's no way I forgot about this. The whole sequence is stressful and heart-racing, from the torturing to the tormenting. It had me on the edge of my seat, and I could pretty much extend this praise to the entire first section of the Claymore manga, minus the first few chapters. The action goes hard, it's very easy to follow, and it's quick, but still weighty. Every encounter is filled with well-drawn panels, painted with passion and anger and dread. You can feel the desperation, the despair. People don't get noble send-offs. They're just dead just like that. The manga is intense. Far more intense than the anime ever got. I don't know why I had such a different reaction to the manga versus the anime when they're basically covering the same things, but anytime I compare a scene from the manga with the anime, it's just no contest. If you're wondering what my complete timeline looks like, I watched the anime first years ago, then I read the manga this year, and then rewatched the anime right after I finished the manga. And that's probably why I dislike the anime. Going from this to this is such a downgrade. I will say I did like the anime a bit more this go around compared to my first time, but still, the manga is just better in every way. Even the characters, despite being pretty much the same, just feel more present here. I actually cared about them, even the new ones that showed up after the time skip. Maybe that's because I get to pick all the VAs myself, and you better believe Jennifer Hale is in the cast. But even a character like Rocky, who pretty much everyone agrees is pretty annoying, wasn't annoying to me in the manga. Not that much, really. I thought he and Claire were pretty fun together, and when he returns post-time skip, I was actually really excited to see him again, and so happy to see how much he's grown. I mean, I'm willing to call the manga a masterpiece just for turning this scrawny kid into an absolute Chad. Now, alright, I could keep glazing this thing all day to get the point across that the stuff this manga does well, it does really well. But I think you get it by now. So let's switch on over to what the manga doesn't do so well. Some of what I'm going to say will sound familiar, mostly the stuff involving Claire, so let's just knock that out right now. Claire kind of stops being the main character for a while in the manga, and I don't even mean when she's turned into a cocoon and absent for like 3 volumes straight. I mean that after the time skip, Claire doesn't really do much of her own accord. She decides to look for Rocky after 7 years, but then just ends up following Miria around the whole time. Following orders, putting her own goals on the back burner until everything else gets settled, which, you know, it's fine, I guess. I mean, it does make a certain amount of sense when every step she takes, she runs into a new problem that needs immediate fixing, but it makes her feel like a passenger in her own story rather than the main character. There's no tension in the team despite the obvious difference in objectives. Claire never really cared about the organization. Once she finds out they're the bad guy, she doesn't defend them or anything, but it's not like she felt a personal need to destroy the organization with her own 2 hands. I think that's probably why she isn't even involved in the last battle against them. It's cathartic to see Miria blow it all up because it's what her journey was always about. But Claire? Sure, she had her grievances, but her main goal throughout the series was always to kill Priscilla, which makes it odd that she never does anything that puts her friends in real risk to achieve this goal. I'm not gonna count when she ignores their advice in certain fights because frankly, if she didn't, then they'd all be dead. But that's kind of the problem too. Things always work out for Claire. She's never punished for her fatal flaw, which makes her feel like she's flawless, but really she's just a follower and that's just boring. You know what would have been more interesting? Have Claire take Rifu's deal. The story already sets it up perfectly. The first time Claire meets her, she thinks she's stronger than ever. She just killed an awakened being by herself with her new broken quicksword technique, but then she fights Dauf and struggles quite a bit, and it gets even worse. When Rifu shows off her true form, Claire realizes she's just been playing with her and the others this whole time. But more importantly, this Yoma, who is stronger than any other Yoma Claire has faced, including the other Yoma, who is stronger than any other Yoma Claire has faced, straight up says she can't beat Priscilla. She needs an army. Imagine how that feels. You just got an insane buff and you figured you were stronger than ever, ready to avenge the person you love most, only to be slapped in the face with the painful realization that nothing has changed. You're still as weak as ever. You can't win. You're trying to fight an MLB Hall of Famer and all your hard work did was move you from T-ball to Little League. And it doesn't stop there because Claire keeps fighting and training for 7 long years in the north. And then when she meets Rifu again, all her training did was make her better at running away. Claire knows she can't win, but she needs more power, and Rifu is willing to give it to her. Now sure, she's gonna need Claire to awaken, which is kind of a bad thing, but as long as Claire can still hold on to her identity like Rifu does, would it really be so bad a thing? Rifu doesn't act like a rabid dog. She's in control of her own nature. She isn't running around looking for human guts to eat all the time. And in case you forgot, both Claire and Rifu want Priscilla dead. This should have been the deal. If Rifu can show Claire how to keep her sanity through the transformation, then she'll join her army to kill Priscilla. Now, I'm not saying this is a smart alliance, but it's one that's totally in character for Claire to make if the story wants me to believe that she's driven by a deep desire for revenge. And it's definitely a good way to flesh out one of Claymore's main themes. What makes you a real human being? And what makes you a real hero? The alliance idea does eventually get used, but it's with all of these guys who were introduced towards the end, and it's Miria's idea, not Claire's. And this is all related to another big problem I have with this manga. There are way too many characters who, honestly, do not matter to this story. It's like each new volume introduces a whole volume's worth of new characters who basically do nothing. They're just there to pad out the runtime with more battles and pointless action scenes. A few are on the interesting side, sure, but most just take time away from developing and using the ones we already know and love in unique and character-specific ways. I don't care about this former number 1 who's obsessed with number 2. I care about Claire and her quest for revenge, and Miria and her quest for justice, and Rocky and his love quest. If some of these old characters got killed off to make room for the new ones, that'd be one thing, but they don't. Even when it seems like there's no way they survived. Even Alina comes back, like, why? It's like the manga gets scared to kill off its cast even though its 2 best arcs have insane kill counts. It used to feel like no one was safe except for Claire for obvious reasons, but then people just stopped dying. It becomes hard to feel worried in any of these fights because time and time again, they all walk away like nothing ever happened, which is why these fights somehow get boring after a while despite how crazy they look. The manga just isn't very focused. It keeps adding noise to an otherwise straightforward story, and it jumps between a dozen different characters all around the map constantly, which is disorienting to say the least. Not to mention, it will occasionally insert extended flashbacks or side stories in the middle of a big battle which either have little to do with the here and now, or will explain exactly one thing that'll be super important in a minute, meaning we probably should have seen this earlier to adequately set up the payoff, but it just didn't work out like that. And I think that's because Yagi was initially more concerned with designing characters instead of building the world. When you look at the early chapters of Claymore, you'll notice that they're pretty different from everything post-Teresa. It is very much a standard sword and sorcery story in the typical dark fantasy setting. There are hints of a bigger world, but the lore hadn't yet been set in stone. Why is Robana the only city on the continent that bans claymores? If it's because they know the deep dark truth about the organization, then why haven't they done anything? Why does the organization allow them to exist? Why are claymores trained in acting and deception when their whole purpose is to find and fight Yoma? Do they really need to engage in subtle trickery? I mean, I can understand asking around town for some basic information, but they already have the ability to detect Yoki. Is that not good enough? Or are you telling me a claymore's best chance at killing a Yoma might just be to pose as a prostitute? But now how can that happen when claymores are canonically mood killers? These are just a couple of examples of things that don't make a whole lot of sense when you learn more about the world of Claymore. They are leftovers from a more episodic, simplistic sword and sorcery story. And by the time you get to the halfway point, things have gotten very complicated. And yet Claire stays simplistic throughout. Her goal doesn't change, her character doesn't change. Not until the final fight with Priscilla. So in the meantime, it feels like she's just there waiting for an ending that keeps getting pushed back. I really got the sense that Claire was taken out of the story for a while because Yagi wasn't sure what to do with her anymore. All that was left for her character was the final confrontation with Priscilla, but there were still so many unanswered questions about this world that needed to be answered, as well as other arcs, old and new, that were set up and now needed some kind of payoff before the finale. That's why you end up with a single battle that has like 4 different sub-battles happening all at once, which also shoves in important exposition into the mix. I also feel like the art stops getting better after a certain point and starts getting worse. No, it's not the art actually, it's just the designs. The early Awakened beings looked so cool and chilling. Yagi got pretty creative with these abominations of nature. But after a while, they start to look, I don't know, wrong? Weird, but not in a good way. Out of place, that might be a better way to describe it. They're all uncanny mismatches and bizarrely drawn naked women, or just naked women. Honestly, it gets a little goofy at times, like, is this Claymore or High School DxD? Not that I've ever watched that. I will defend Agatha though, okay? She's got the whole Venus flytrap thing going on for her, and you know, that's fine, alright? I dig it. But as for most of the others, I feel like Yagi used up all his best designs by volume 16. It's not like everything just sucks after the time skip. I'd argue it's actually quite good for a while. I think the point where the story starts to suffer is like volume 17, maybe 18, around the time Priscilla leaves Rocky and there's the big battle with her, the Destroyer, the twins, and Claire and her friends. That's the turning point where the manga puts spectacle over story. It's scene after scene of massive action set pieces which sound cool, but it gets tiring after a while. It's the same basic fight each time with loads of regeneration and mid-fight exposition and backstories, and it just goes on and on and on. When you look at the fights before the time skip, each of them are tense and horrific and serve a clear purpose. Whenever they start to feel a little repetitive, the manga switches things up to keep it fresh. The monsters get more unhinged designs, the circumstances of the fights are changed, and the characters go through hell. And when they do, the manga doesn't hold back. It is bleak, but it makes the characters shine all the brighter, because despite all their hardship, despite everything they've lost, despite knowing that it won't get any easier, and that in all likelihood they can't win, they keep moving forward. This isn't really there in the later section of Claymore. Sure, they're still outclassed and put in near unwinnable situations, but they're always able to come out on top relatively unscathed and unchanged. The most egregious example is probably when Miria gets brutally killed only for it to be revealed they just cut her up a bit and now she's fine. But really, that's just one part of it. I don't like how Miria's war against the organization is so clean. She decides immediately that they won't be killing any Claymores, and she's able to basically solo most of them non-lethally. eventually, and it's just such a missed opportunity. We could have seen her grapple with her convictions as she raises a sword against the people she's trying to save. It's not like the typical Claymore is a pillar of justice. Most of them just follow what the organization says without question. Some, like Teresa, even know that the organization is probably the bad guy, but they just don't care because it's all they have. They aren't human, they're just weapons with a personality. And as we're shown, they didn't even have a problem with killing each other. They're a highly competitive bunch. It's only the 7 ghosts and a few exceptions on the other side that show up later that act like human beings. And it makes sense in context given all of the things that happened to them. But instead of doing this weighty, highly emotionally driven civil war, things just work out through the power of friendship and magic. It feels so out of place, like the story changed its tone halfway through. Remember when Claire executed her friend, someone who she supported and who supported her through the grueling Claymore training process, all because it had to be done? There were no other options? Because there were no happy endings where everyone makes it out just fine? What happened to that story, to that tone? The hard decisions these characters used to have to make get so easy by the end. And speaking of the end, it takes way too long to end. There's always some new development that drags out what could have easily ended in a single volume. Was it cool to see Teresa come back after all this time? Sure, I guess. But was it necessary? Did it really add anything to the conclusion? Not really. Teresa herself even states as much. It's just fan service that only happened because of overly convoluted shenanigans involving the fusion and memory linking of like 3 different characters that I'm not getting into because it takes too long to explain. I love how Rocky and Claire defeat Priscilla. It's peak, it's surprising, it's thematically consistent. These 2 underdogs everyone wrote off just beat an eldritch demon. And in Claire's quest for revenge for Teresa, she becomes Teresa, not literally, but symbolically. She is the strongest Claymore by the end, and it's not just because of her sick new abilities, it's because of the relationships she made along the way. Yes, I am praising the power of friendship and magic, despite making fun of it like 5 minutes ago, because this is how you do it. The organization intentionally kept these Claymores isolated and scattered. If they connected with others, they'd be weakened by new emotions. Claymores are weapons, and if they become too human, they become inefficient, hesitant, they become a dull blade. Humanity is a weakness that got Teresa killed, but that same weakness is what saves the world in the end. I love it. End it there. You don't need to keep going. I am happy at the very least it didn't continue with an excursion to the mainland to get revenge on the organization there and the war between those 2 spiritually Latinx nations. And maybe that surprises you. I know some people feel like the island revelation was half-baked, but I don't really mind how it's handled. The story was never about saving the world by destroying all the Yoma and the ones responsible for their creation. It's not Attack on Titan. Even though Attack on Titan certainly took some inspiration from this one. Now, I've seen people call Attack on Titan a Claymore ripoff, and I can see why they say that, but I don't know, I feel like they're pretty different. I mean, if you just look at the main character's goal, you'll see one big difference right off the bat. Eren wants to kill all the monsters and save humanity. Claire wants to kill one monster and save whoever she happens to see. This is why Eren ends up fighting the entire world once he discovers the truth, since in his view, Marley and the others are the real monsters. But Claire doesn't do that because she only cared about killing Priscilla. The revelation doesn't change anything for her. Priscilla is still the one who murdered Teresa. Now, maybe you could argue Claire should be directing her anger more at the organization for creating the circumstances for Teresa's murder, but it's not that Claire is on their side. She wants to see it fall as much as the others. She just really hates Priscilla. And once Priscilla is defeated, she decides to stop being a weapon and start being a person. So many people gave up their lives for her to have this chance at happiness. She owes it to them, and frankly, to herself. So it really doesn't make sense for her to keep on fighting, at least not battles like that. That's why I'm glad it ended right after she finally avenged Teresa. And I'm happy it's a happy ending too. I know I just complained that the tone stopped being bleak and morbid, but I'm fine with breaking that tone for the end. Tolkien coined this one term, eucatastrophe. It basically means going from the absolute lowest, most hopeless circumstance to complete and total victory in like the shortest amount of time as possible. It's peak writing in my opinion, and it's already sort of there in Claymore, but I don't know, I think it would have been more satisfying for me at least if more of the 7 ghosts died and Priscilla died here instead of later. There's just too much noise, as I said earlier. But whatever. It is technically what happened, so really I'm just nitpicking, but it's what I do. Alright, I feel like I need to reiterate this because I just said a lot of mean things about this manga, but I really like it. I criticize because I care, alright? The world was interesting, the characters were likable, the art was amazing, and the story was satisfying. It is great. I'm just not gonna pretend like it couldn't have been better. I still think a solid third of this manga could have been cut and the existing stuff tweaked just a little to keep it feeling consistently interesting, but I'll tell you one thing I don't want. A sequel. Unless it takes place like 200 years later or something and doesn't involve Claire. I don't want an extended epilogue to Claire's story. But I don't even think I need to really worry about a Claymore sequel coming out anytime soon. Claymore as a series has been silent since 2014, the year the manga finished. The only other thing besides the manga and the anime was this Japanese-only DS game from 2009, but yeah, other than that, nothing. No new manga project, no anime reboot. Yagi moved on to other things. He made another manga that on the surface looks pretty similar to Claymore, but it's more of a lighthearted shonen, or so I'm told. I haven't read it. From what I've seen of Yagi, he doesn't like to milk things. Once he's confident he's explored everything he wanted to in a story, he just ends it and makes a new one. And that new one is usually something pretty different from what came before, so I don't think there's ever gonna be another Claymore manga, be it sequel, prequel, or even a sidequel. As for a new anime, it's entirely possible, but not all that probable. Claymore wasn't exactly a commercial hit. It made some money and garnered enough attention to get one anime, but by the time that anime had released, people were already starting to get a little frustrated with where the manga was going. It had enough fans to keep things going, but not enough new fans to justify making any new things. And at this point, it's been like 10 years since the manga ended. There's really no reason to make another anime. But I mean, you could say the same thing about Spice and Wolf, which just got an anime and another season announced, very cool. So, I don't know. Maybe it will come back. There has been a resurgence of interest in Claymore in these past few years, so I wouldn't rule out a new anime entirely, I just wouldn't get my hopes up. But you know what, that's fine with me. I don't think anything will top the manga anyway. But what do you guys think? Was I too harsh on the anime? Was I not harsh enough on the manga? And do you want a Claymore sequel, or at the very least a full anime adaptation of the manga? Comment down below, like and subscribe, watch the video again on mute in the background, do whatever boost engagement. I like money. Anyway, until next time, Ave Maria, Deus Vult, and a big thank you to all the cultured.